Welcome back to Under Oath. Today we have actor, singer, director, producer, and now podcaster, Tony Goldwyn. Tony, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Thanks for having me.
I got to tell you, your fan base runs from 70 to 18. I've never seen this demographic before.
Well, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, I remember
That's because
seeing
I've
you
been
in
doing it for
Ghost.
so long.
Yeah, it's amazing. When I told people in the office I was interviewing you, it was strange. Oh, he was from Ghost. Oh my God, I love him as a president in Scandal. Your career, you have somehow captured this audience, and they have followed you forever.
Yeah, well, I'm very grateful. It's like when you something that we talk about in my podcast. Some advice my dad had given me. Who, for those who don't know, I'm like the third generation of our family in show business. He'd said, it's not about being on the cover of a magazine when you're 25. It's about sustaining a career when you're into your 50s and still doing what you love to do. And I think that's why, because I've been doing it for a while and been able to have the opportunity to touch so many different people through the different stories that I've been able to be a part of. So it's a really beautiful thing. I'm very grateful.
Now, I've included my daughter, who is actually 20. She turns 20 in December, but I've included her in my show and everything. And now you have a podcast with your own daughter.
Yeah. So my daughter Anna, who's a screenwriter and a television writer, is now the fourth generation of Goldwyns in show business, in the entertainment industry. And we got fascinated. It's a very important part of our relationship that we get to talk about our work together and have that be something that is in common. And as it was with me and my dad. And we got interested in like finding out what that's like for other, you know, parent and child duos who work in the same industry, whether literally in the same company or just in the same, like us in the same business. And we had this just started doing these conversations with people, and we've had some incredible conversations. So we just spend 40 minutes or an hour talking to a parent and a child about what that's been like for each of them, and how they find their way into it, and how it's impacted their relationship as a mother son, father daughter, and uh, we've had some really beautiful conversations.
Now, here's the thing. Fathers, daughters, fathers, sons. It's always difficult because, as a child myself at the time, I couldn't take advice from my dad. I thought I knew everything, and the more advice he gave me, the less I wanted to listen. And now I'm at an age where, and he's gone now, that I can't go to him. I can't get that advice I need. How do you even think about relaying that to your own child?
Yeah, it's such an important thing you say. Look, we all have to figure things out for ourselves. It was the same way when I was in my 20s. I didn't want to hear from my dad, partly because I wanted to carve my own way. And then as I got older, I realized I could learn a lot from him, and I did. As a parent, I just try and uh, be keep a dialogue open, I guess, with my two daughters, as opposed to trying to uh, enforce anything or tell them how it's supposed to be. Because I learned for myself that I had to figure stuff out for in my own way. So I just try and keep the door open for a conversation. And sometimes they really come to me for advice. But one of the things Anna talks about in our first episode of our podcast is really just interviewing each other before we bring in other guests. And she said, Dad, one of the things that I had to learn was not to go to you for advice. That sometimes it was too easy having you and my wife Jane, who's in the film industry as well, as a designer. She's a film designer. She's not being able to go to you and mom for every problem that I had. I learned that it was better sometimes not to go to you, to find other mentors or figure things out for myself. So it's a mixed bag. It can be complicated. My kids have never been like, do not talk to me. Because I think that Jane and I are careful not to kind of, shove our noses in where it might not be wanted.
That's a tough thing because now that I've had a chance to regurgitate and see all the mistakes I made in my life, and I'm trying to
Hmm.
figure out when was that first time it hit me. Like you mentioned with your dad, I finally went to advice. What do you think that moment was where you go, you know what? I could actually benefit from this advice.
Well, for me, okay, so this is kind of My father was very anxious when I told him I wanted to be an actor. He really tried to be supportive, but he knew how hard it was. So he was quite like, he wanted me to understand how much I could fail at this, So I was kind of in my 20s, I was very close to him, but also resentful of the fact that he didn't just say, yeah, go for it. It's going to be great. And then I realized in my early 30s, really, finally, after I'd had some real success, the I had been a little tough on him, feeling like that he had made him into a bit of a bad guy for judging me or not being supportive enough or whatever I felt. And I realized it wasn't him; it was me. Like those were that was baggage that I um, was carrying, and all I needed to do was put it down and not I don't know if that makes any sense. Not like assign those problems to him. And when I realized, no, he's just trying to be, and maybe imperfect, but as loving and supportive a father as he can be. And when I kind of realized that I was responsible for my own situation, it kind of opened up our relationship, and I was able to take advice from him and to seek his advice without feeling judged by it. And sometimes I'd go, "Yeah, I hear you, but I'm not doing that."
It's a very tough thing to recognize that you might not be right. And,
Yeah.
when you're young, you think you know everything. And as you get older, you realize either I got dumber or I didn't know what I thought I knew.
Oh, that's so true. That's so true. Uh, yeah, and honestly, one of the beautiful things about doing this podcast with my daughter is I learned so much from her. And one of the things that I've really had to learn as a parent is to allow her to experience things for herself, both success and failure. She was someone who was successful right out of the gate. When she got out of school, she got a big job and everything was going great for her. And part of me was going, oh my God, I know that the there's a 2x4 waiting to whack her at some point, around the corner that she doesn't
Yeah.
see. And of course that happened. And when that happened, I wanted to kind of ride in and help. And I've learned, like, no, that's so important, that we allow our children to own their successes and to fall on their face when they need to, and I don't need to be the one to fix it, and frankly I can't. So it was a big lesson for me as a parent, not just as a kid thinking about my relationship with my dad, but allowing my children to own their own successes and failures, and that both are really an important part of life.
When you talk about that, it brings me back to doing a couple things with my daughter. We just did a commercial for autism awareness. And in the middle of it, I stopped it. I said, all right, you got to do this, this, and this. And I changed from being her father to a professional in the industry. And it was so, at the end of it, I tried to explain to her, hopefully that didn't offend you. I didn't mean to do that. I just wanted the best performance out of you. Is there a line that you and your daughter see that you're going, okay, now I'm being the professional. I'm stepping away from dad for a second?
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, in the podcasting arena, she's more the expert than me. She already has a podcast that she does, a political podcast, and so I was new to it. And she will be like, "Dad, you're talking too much, or you need to be more concise," or she'll give me advice, which always makes me laugh. Um, I'm pretty on the professional level, being in the same industry. Sometimes when my kids will show me their work, like Anna will send me a script and be like, "What do you think of this?" I only offer advice when I'm invited to. So I remember how loud, not literally, but figuratively, how loud my dad's voice was when he would critique my work. So I'm very cautious to know that my voice has a big impact on my kids. So I try to be as sensitive to that in the way that I give advice or notes or comments, or So I just know it's it's we as parents have a power. You giving your daughter
Yeah.
advice. That was great that you said that to her, but we have to remember how our kids hear it. You know what I mean?
It's tough because I'll hear a comment. She'll say, 5 years ago, you told me this, and she carries it with her.
Yeah,
And
man.
I forget it
Yeah.
within 2 seconds because I think I'm just being a dad and supportive. And it's so difficult now to go, okay, what am I doing? Is this going to be more harmful or helpful? And I think as a
Yeah.
father, you've had to deal with this a lot.
Yeah, and this is something we talk about a lot in our podcast because we're talking to other parents and children who are in the same industry. You know, our first interview, which drops on the 16th, is with Jane Fonda and her son Troy Garrity, and you know, we talk a lot about like how do Jane and Troy being, you know, Troy being from a like me, a multi-generational family. His grandfather's, you know, Henry Fonda was one of the, you know, legends of, you know, one of the big movie stars of the golden age, and his mom is an icon, and his uncle Peter Fonda was an icon, and how that was for him, and how do they talk about that, you know? And Jane had a very complicated relationship with her dad, Henry Fonda, and it's you know, who had a big impact on her. It's complicated, you know, and that's one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast.
The hard thing that I think about sometimes, especially in today's term, like I'm helping my daughter, I'm teaching her, I'm doing whatever I can. And we live in a world where everyone's going to go, well, she only got where she got is because of nepotism and things like that. And I didn't have that growing up. If my father helped me, we considered that fortunate that he was there for me and he did these things. And it's so difficult to go, okay, I don't know how much I should help because the world out there is pretty cruel to somebody in your situation.
Look, we all want to help our kids thrive. It's our responsibility to do that as parents. That's part of parenting. This, you know, again, one of the motivators for this podcast is Ann and I would laugh about this whole Nepo baby thing
Yeah.
that's come to this kind of pejorative, you know, thing that people say. And I've always felt so lucky to be a part of it. And we talked about it. I thought, well, you know, it's a very normal thing in human history that, of course, you know, someone far away and the children going into the kind of the family business or the family industry or into the family company is such a natural thing. And when did that become like a negative? So we wanted to talk about that. And certainly in our business, you know, I found it certainly as an actor, there wasn't much my dad could do for me. I guess he could have helped me get a job, you know, but he kind of said to me when I started, he said, look, if you're going to do this, you're on your own. You know, you got to figure this out. And frankly, as an actor, if I couldn't deliver the goods, I wasn't going to get a job, or someone might give me a job because they knew my dad, but a, probably not, and B, it probably wouldn't go so well if that's why I got the job. And you know, Anna's a writer. If she can't put it on the page, she's not going to get work. You know, I certainly will do everything I can to introduce her to people or try and, you know, what Jane and I more have done is try and give them a sense of the landscape and an understanding of the vicissitudes of the business, and to see from us that it's like what it's like, that it's a workman-like industry, and to get the stars out of their eyes, you know, to get the glamour ain't what it's about. It's about, you know, it's a working profession. And that was something all we tried to give our kids, a sense of the reality of what it is, as much as we have a deep passion for it and love and feel so lucky to be doing it, doing something that we love, you know. So it's complex, you know, and people have a weird perception of it, which again is why we wanted to have these conversations.
You know, when I first found out I was interviewing you, one of the women in my office went nuts because, oh my God, I love him on Scandal. You know, he plays the president and everything else like that. And I also write comic books. So I put President Obama in one of my books. And I had to take my politics completely out of it and try to empathize on what the president would feel in that position. And you played the president on this show, and every time you see a script, does it sometimes go, wait a minute, I don't know if I, as the president, would say this or do this? Do you ever have those conversations?
Oh yeah, I mean, Shonda Rhimes and I had that conversation a lot, and I found that to be the most interesting thing about playing that character of Fitz that I played, you know, when I was the president. It was a fantastical world that she created, but, you know, and I played a guy who audiences amazingly adored this character, but I behaved very badly. And one of the things that was a key for me was realizing as I studied presidents and studying in Obama, and it was when Obama was in the White House, and that every president is just a man, just a human being. You get sort of thrust into this world, whatever your politics are, you're then, you know, dealing with problems that are every time a problem gets, I heard Obama say, every time the problem gets to the Oval Office, it's an impossible problem with no easy solution. So whether you're Donald Trump or Barack Obama or Richard Nixon or Bill Clinton, you know, these are just men who are stepping and trying to manage a situation that they're probably, that first day they step in, they're ill equipped for. So humanity of that I found just fascinating, and had tremendous for.
Now, when you find out you're going to play the president, do you start thinking about how other actors played him? You know, whether it be Michael Douglas or somebody else or Martin Sheen, and you go, I wonder if my president, the way I do it, will have that same bearing, or is it just going, I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it?
I didn't, for purpose. I didn't want to look at other movie or TV presidents. I kind of burrowed down on certain presidents. So I kind of went uh, deep on. I'd always been fascinated with. I'd read a lot of presidential biographies, so I kind of went obsessed on Obama and Clinton and George W. Bush and George Bush Sr. As a kind of spectrum of. They all had different qualities that I thought were important for Fitz, the guy that I was playing. Um, and So I got into looking at them and how they conducted themselves and how they approached the job, and in ways where they failed and succeeded, and their frailties and gifts, rather than trying to look at, even though I had huge admiration for Martin Sheen and, President Bartlett, what he did with that. I wanted to kind of use my source material as the real thing.
Now, you had mentioned that women seem to gravitate toward. You said this is an unlikable guy, but women still like him. And I mean, you started your career. I mean, one of your earliest films was Ghost, where you are clearly the villain in this movie. And did you think that when you did that, you said, God, I don't want to be typecast in this bad guy role, but it's so much fun at the same time?
Yeah, exactly what you said. I was at the time I got Ghost, the parts that I was grateful to have any job I could get in those days. Um, I would play because I was sort of it was maybe, conventional kind of young, like all American kid, good guy. And just the way that I was perceived, I kind of wanted to do something more complex. So when I had the opportunity to play a villain like I did in Ghost and try and make him kind of sympathetic and a guy that you know, initially kind of were drawn to and liked, and who turns out to be this morally bankrupt human being. I thought that was just a really interesting challenge, and I was thrilled to be able to do it and not be kind of typecast in the more milk toasty kind of role. And then, of course, I then was typecast as the yuppie bad guy, which I was then trying to resist. And I've kind of made my peace with it, and found that I've just kind of gone with the flow of what of playing all different kinds of roles. So I'm very grateful to playing. By the time I ended up, 30 years later, 25 years later, whatever it was, when I did, Scandal, having played a real range, Fitz, that character was a guy who was both. He was someone that women were really drawn to, and he was, ennobled in some ways, and then doing things just unspeakably immoral behavior he was engaged in, and that somehow people were rooting for him. I just thought that's the real, gifts of Shonda Rhimes, who's a great writer and has just great fun, towing that line, swinging back and forth. She did a lot of fun with that.
Well, I can't tell you how much everyone loves it. We've got about 45 seconds left. Why don't you tell me where we can actually listen to the podcast?
So, Far From the Tree is on wherever you listen to podcasts, on Spotify or Apple Music or really any platform. We're up. And Yeah, you'll hear interviews with people in sports, politics, business, showbiz, just all different kinds of really fascinating conversations about being a parent and a kid in the same game.
Well, it's great talking, Tony. I can't tell you how much fun this has been.
Oh, thank you. Same for me.